Hello, worldies, and welcome back to my naughty little channel. Excuse my voice. I don't know why I feel like a tiny little tickle in the back of my throat. So when I'm done recording this, I'll probably drink like some throat coat tea. That's like my favorite. That stuff works. Like literally, if you have a tickle or a little bit of soreness in your throat, I mean that stuff works for numerous other things that I'll probably get into at some other point. But I hope you all are doing well. Um I know that a lot of people have been made aware of a very significant event that has happened that I want to talk about. And I am referencing the unaliving of Charlie Kirk. I actually did not know that this had happened. I actually found out about it from a fellow Exotical. And I don't really want to talk about Charlie Kirk just because I don't really like speaking on people who are deceased. Um, I don't really think that this is about him. I think that this situation has so little to do with him. And I feel like there's a bigger and a broader picture that I'd like to kind of discuss. So every time I open or close a video, I call my audience my worldies. And I have talked about that before. I do go by Y World, and I've kind of spoken about that before, but my platform, I definitely feel like I try to tie things back to, empowering you all to be a thinker, to be a questioner, to ask why, to find your why, your reason behind why you're doing things, to figure out why you act and behave in certain ways, to ask why when you see certain situations take place in your personal life and the broader world. And I definitely feel like I want you all to take from this content to question and to not always just feel like you have to go with the mainstream popular ideas. And I feel as though finding your why, finding your purpose, and your reason for doing things, it can definitely help you, in my opinion, create your world. And that can be, whether you're religious, whether you're spiritual, whether you're into manifestation, law of attraction, whatever. I truly believe that knowing your central purpose, why you're doing things, um, will help you to create the world that you want. And I'm somebody who I've been very blessed that my ability to critically think and to question and to deep dive into myself and do inner work and to look at the world around me and kind of not be afraid to have an unpopular thought or an unpopular opinion on something has helped me achieve some of my greatest accomplishments. It's helped me to level up, to glow up, to social climb, and to really create a world around me that I love. I am the main character in my life, and like 95% of the time, I feel pretty damn good about stuff. Due to this, due to my critical thinking skills. Now, with the Charlie Kirk unaliving, if you are unaware, he was someone who I would say, from what I know about him, was more on the extreme right. I would guess that he would be what you would call like a Christian nationalist. I don't really watch his content. I've seen a few clips, and I always kind of felt like something was just a bit off with him. But like I said, I don't really want to talk about him too much. What I want to really talk about is the deeper aspects of what's going on behind the unaliving of him and what it means for me, what it means for you, what it means for all of us. So, to give you just a little bit of backstory, um, he was, I think, famous for following a a kind of model that I would see that I first saw used by Steven Crowder. If you're not familiar with him, he's, I think, also right leaning. Um, uh, and he had this series that he may even still do, I'm not sure, but he would go around to college campuses around the country and he would set up, I believe he would, like, get permission and everything, and he would discuss with people. And his whole thing would be he was there to discuss maybe trans issues. Maybe he's there to discuss race things. Maybe he's there to discuss gender stuff. Maybe he's there to discuss, whatever. And he would basically want to discuss with people and say, change my mind. Now, when I was younger, I would watch Steven Crowder's Change My Mind series, and I remember the physical reaction that my body would have. I remember being so deeply triggered by him. I remember always wanting to pause the videos to, like, dang near argue to myself or to whatever guy I was dating at the time, or like a friend or whatever, like, oh my God, I can't believe he's saying this or that. And he should feel like this, and my heart would be pounding and it'd make me all hot and sweaty because I would be so triggered by the beliefs that he was saying and all of these things. And so I eventually just, like, stopped watching him. And then I feel like over time I have gotten to the point of feeling as though I think that the simple act of discussing and debating is something that I think we've really taken for granted. And I would love us to have it more. Like, if you're somebody who's more liberal, I would love to see more, people following that format and setting up on maybe what they feel like is a more right leaning campus and talking about things and saying, change my mind. I love the aspect of people being able to discuss and talk about things. I really do like philosophy. I will say that that's one of my kind of favorite things to talk about. I really do love the aspect of being a logical debater. That's something that I've really enjoyed about the exotical space, and something that I try to, work on doing a little bit more. I want to be the type of person who is a good debater, a good arguer. I love when I'll, like, maybe watch a movie or a show that's showing, some sort of, academic debate team or something. And I love that when it comes to that, that type of extracurricular activity, or even if it's a class, it's all about, it's less about the position that you're defending and more so about how sound of an argument can you create. If you've never, like, taken a course on philosophy or read anything about philosophy, there's a lot in, like, there's a lot to philosophy. There's um studying the great classical philosophers who believed this or that about the id, the ego, the superego, the whole, Socrates, Plato, and things like that. And then there's also the aspect of understanding, like, logical fallacies and understanding, what makes something true, what makes something false, what makes a thing a thing. I feel like I've said this on this channel before, but understanding, you may have even seen debates about, like, is ketchup technically a smoothie? It's stuff like that. It's when you're talking to a kid and you're saying something like, oh, did you want a sip of your drink? And they're like, that's not a drink, that's a smoothie. Or, oh, put your shoes on, and your kid's like, these are not shoes, these are boots. Things like that, like what makes a thing a thing. And I feel like kids are really tuned into stuff like that. And, I feel like it really can help you understand, in the political landscape and all of the mess of what's going on, being able to understand these aspects of philosophy and breaking down arguments is, a skill that I think will take you very far, especially I think when it comes to, you know, one of the ways that I try to walk throughout the world is me personally, when people dislike me, um, I don't go immediately towards sexism, racism, colorism, featureism, texturism. I don't go right to that. I go towards, well, I can be kind of a bitch sometimes. I can be a little conceited sometimes. I go towards, well, I look pretty good, or I go towards, I am a constantly evolving type of person. I'm very driven. A lot of people, if they know me and they're the type of person who is stagnant, my very existence, my presence can be triggering because one, I'm very assertive. I'm very direct. So um if you're like a conflict avoidant type of person or a more passive aggressive type of person, you might be triggered by my existence. People who like to beat around the bush and things like that. And sometimes that can even just be a cultural thing. But I do feel like just part of my background, I have some immigrants in my background and stuff like that, where that's kind of how they grew up. Like they don't really do the whole, small talking, beating around the bush. You'll even see clips online where they talk about, there's this creator that I'm picturing. It's a white woman. I like her content. I think she's so funny. But she'll like kind of maybe like cosplay or do like these skits where it's talking about how Southern people talk, how they're like talking about subtext and things like that. um Me, I like being direct, I like being assertive, I like just saying what I mean to say. If I feel like somebody has an issue with me, I'm just going to come out and like address it. If I feel like maybe I was a bitch to somebody, I don't know, I'm just like that type of person where I'll be like, yeah, this might make me sound like a bitch, but oh, you probably think that, or I'll even say like, oh, I'm probably not as liberal as people might think that I should be, or this, that, and the third. Like, oh, I'm probably more, whatever. I'll just like call out my flaw, whatever it is sometimes, just because I don't know, that's just kind of how I navigate. I like to just kind of call things out the way they are. But I really do like the aspects of, you know, myself and other people where, you know, I don't have this inferiority complex where I'm looking for rejection everywhere. And every time somebody disagrees with me, it's confirming my bias that, see, that person is colorist. See, that person is texturist. See, that person is racist. See, that person is sexist. See, that person is futurist. And no matter where you stand politically, I don't really think that the unaliving of Charlie Kirk has anything really to do with left or right. I really don't think it does. I think it says a lot about power dynamics, about stability, about emotional control, and things like that. I have even seen people give the thought that it is possible that he was more so like sacrificed or being used as a distraction on, the world stage to distract from like those like Pizzagate and all that good stuff, the island, the files, um things like that, which I like when people think like that. I don't like when people just want to look at something surface level, like, oh, this person said these things, and so, hate begets hate, and then people do that. Because guess what? In this exotical space, there are a lot of women who watch this content, they hate watch it, and they feel like we are being hateful. They feel rejected, they feel demoralized, they feel dismissed when we claim our other backgrounds, when we allow ourselves to either jump in and out of blackness, when we say things like, oh, I love my skin tone, I love my features, I love my hair texture, I love my admixture, I love the people in my family that are not black, I love being an exotical, things like that. There are people who will hear those same words and they will say that's anti black, that's hateful, that's hate speech, you know? And I think it's dangerous, and it's a slippery slope to, no matter where you stand politically, to have such a kind of neutral approach to, you know, uh, a political assassination, because you have no idea what views you have that the next person feels are hateful. Doesn't mean that you're hateful. And me, like I said, this is not going to be about him, because I've heard some allegations about him, things that I have not actually been able to research myself, but I am rarely the type of person to want to defend a person, and more so look for what does it mean for the grand scheme of things. If we condone this, does that mean that when we disagree with people, or we don't like what people are saying, that we feel like it is then justified to you know have them have their life taken from them? Do we really feel like that? Because if that's the case, for this entire sector, that definitely can have really damaging implications. You have no idea how many people are looking at this situation, they're justifying it, they're saying that he deserved it and things like that. And then those same people could be turning around and wanting to use that same logic to justify your harm. People celebrate when exoticals are harmed, when they are abused, when they're dealing with DV, when they are, you know, just harmed, and when negative things happen to them. Look at how people reacted to Tyla, the situation with her fainting, or like the whatever happened, like I think somebody said like maybe her drink was spiked or something like that. Look at how nasty so many unambiguous black women felt about that situation, simply because Tyla said, I am colored. Where she is from in South Africa, that is what she is called. If you see her parents, if you see her family, if you understand anything about the caste system, if you understand anything about South Africa and apartheid and things like that, what she said, to me is going to be like, oh, that's just a factual thing that I don't have any emotions about. Over there, they view race differently. Over there, she is called colored. That's what she's called. But a lot of people, when it came to her being marketed towards African American people, Black Americans, um, they took it very personally that she was not saying, I am not colored, I am Black, I am an unambiguous dark skinned Black woman. I am a monoracial light skinned woman. A lot of people disliked and felt that it was hateful, that it was anti Black, the way that she chose to basically stand on business and defend her right to defend herself, or to identify herself the way that she is. And give me one moment. I just have to take a sip. My throat is feeling a tickle. I'm drinking on some creatine, oxyshred, and L-carnitine this morning, as I do most mornings. I feel like I have a frog in my throat, but I definitely wanted to try to put something out and talk about this while it's still fresh. I want to try to talk about things when they're fresher. I feel like I sometimes shy away from discussing things when they're relevant and current, and then I speak about things way after. Like I literally still have an unreleased video on Sky Jackson because I was just like, oh, I don't know how people are going to feel about this take, but I'm trying to be more brave, more fearless, and just put out my thoughts. But you know whether or not you agree with how she handled the Breakfast Club interview or her, and how she has handled certain things like awards, like how she takes them, whether or not you like her personality, you know, it is really sick, in my opinion, to feel like, oh, because I dislike you, because I feel like you're not humble enough, because I don't like the way that you're identifying yourself, you then deserve to have your drink spiked. To possibly, she could have been sexually assaulted. She could have, like, you have no idea. She could, like, no, you have no idea what happened. But so many people were really having these dark, kind of sadistic, really nasty thoughts about her, just because she identified as colored. And, you know, that it is just such a slippery slope for anybody who's a free thinker, anybody who's a critical thinker, anybody who, just is not a regular person that's just a part of a monolith, to where you're just a walking stereotype and people can predict every line, every opinion, every belief of yours. If you have anything about you that is, unexpected or surprising, or people would have to actually get to know you for a bit to figure that out. You don't fit the regular mold. This belief of, if I deem what you're saying to be hateful, then you deserve to be unalived, or it's justified, or it was only a matter of time. That's a really dangerous thought. And, I really would ask, like, who benefits from his unaliving? Who loses out with his unaliving? I try not to be too political on here, but in all actuality, I think that people, they don't understand that assassinations, um, they don't typically have the impact that people think they will have. People think that, okay, we're unaliving this person, and they think that that's going to eradicate their ideology. That's not what happens. It actually creates martyrs. And then what also happens is people look at the reactions to the assassination. It does not reflect in a positive light on a political party or on a political, sector or space or whatever. If you are celebrating violence, if you are justifying violence, you are losing. Even if that person was assassinated, the person who truly loses is, I would say, the victims of, things with the Pizzagate and Epstein and stuff like that, who may really have needed us to all put our attention there and our focus there. They're losing out because now there's this new other big thing that everybody's talking about. Like, literally, because I said people have, allegedly said certain things about him kind of having some kind of twisted views about children and stuff, which, me, I was like, oh my God, like, thank you for telling me about that. And I wanted to look that up just to get more informed. I even, like, was typing in Charlie Kirk opinions on children, Charlie Kirk opinions on kids, and all I can get is hundreds of videos talking about this now. All of the other information gets hidden, just in the algorithm. It's no longer top priority. There are things that whenever we have these big, maybe it's an assassination, maybe it's whatever type of thing, it's oftentimes distracting from something else. It's, you don't know, when we're all distracted talking about this while people are making TikToks celebrating, somebody being unalived and whatnot. You have no idea what type of legislature, um, is or legislation is being passed right now. You have no idea what's going on in the global stage because our attention is pulled in one way. All of our eyes are focused over there. So anybody else, we're all kind of losing when something like this happens, because there are things that are going on that's happened. If you really, like, deep dive into politics and whatnot, which, me, I am not a poli sci major or anything like that. I am definitely not as informed as I could be, and I'm trying to become more informed day by day. Um, but we all lose when something big like this happens. You don't know what's going on in Congress when everybody's reporting on this, everybody's talking about this, everybody's making a think piece about this. You have no idea what is being slid under, something that could hurt us all, no matter where we stand politically. You have no idea what is being passed right now. You have no idea, with something like this happening, what it could be, used to justify. I'm a big believer in sometimes, if, the powers that be have a goal of, okay, our goal is that we want to be able to have this certain amount of power. We want the people, the general public, to give up this freedom. It's very possible that something can be staged, someone can be sacrificed, something can happen to basically now justify this or that happening. And you don't know how things can actually go. You know, um, People who benefit from his unaliving is not necessarily people who disagreed with him politically. It would be oftentimes the people who share his ideology, because one, it makes him into a martyr, it immortalizes him, and it creates basically this distinction in the media, no matter where you are politically. I feel like me, as a person who I try to stay pretty moderate on things, I try to go things case by case, issue by issue. I never assume that I am more informed than the next person. I never assume that because somebody else disagrees with me, it's because they're ignorant, it's because they're stupid, it's because they're brainwashed. Um, and I feel like that allows me to keep a more balanced perspective on things and see things from a different, you know, level of depth than other people can. Right now, just even if aliens came down and were to look at what's going on, you can see, okay, so somebody was unalived. People on this side of the aisle are tearful, they're sad, they're extending their condolences, and there are other people who are like, yes, finally, ha ha ha. And I'm not going to critique if you're feel like that, because I know that there are some exoticals in the space who do feel like that. And I this is not to condemn you for that. Something I will say that I have enjoyed seeing is that, like, I actually went over to Charlie Kirk's channel because, I don't subscribe to him. I've never been subscribed to him. I never really have seen his content like that. I've more so, if anything, seen like ads from Turning Point that will pop up sometimes. Or I think he's Turning Point, and then sometimes I'll see what PragerU will pop up as an ad sometimes. But I have been very deeply touched, and it's given me hope in humanity, seeing under like his most recent post and videos so many people who are more liberal, they're more, left leaning, saying, hey, I have not disagreed with anything that this man has ever said. Still, I condemn this assassination. I am sorry to his wife, to his kids. That is what I think we need more of. I think that we would be in a much better place politically, globally, nationally, uh, as a human race, if there was more of that. And every time I see that, I love it. Saying, hey, I disagreed with you, but you didn't have to like be unalived. Like, I thought you were a jerk. I thought that you were blankist, whatever. Even people who felt like that, like, oh, I really thought that you were like a sexist, crazy pig. I still don't think that that is what should have happened. That is what, you know, I wish I was seeing more of that, because it does make it so that things get more extreme. It makes some people look more logical and more sane. It makes other people look like lunatics, and I'm not going to say that he's not a lunatic or he was not a lunatic or anything. Like I said, I don't want to try to speak on the deceased. And I have heard takes of his that I deeply disagreed with. I've heard some takes of his where I'm like, oh, okay, I feel like that is reasonable. Like, that doesn't completely rub me the wrong way. Sometimes people, they keep talking and then you're like, oh, now you lost me. But um this unaliving, it distracts us all from things that could be happening. And it does give media the opportunity, if you are somebody who is more liberal. It does strengthen the belief that some people have that people on the left are illogical and that they're insane and that they're this, that, and the third. It strengthens that belief. You know, there are a lot of people who feel as though on the left you have to be a very specific type of way or you will deal with hate, you know, and things like this. You have to really think about who is watching and what does it say about people. You know, I wish that there was more highlight, you know, and more focus being put on the people on the left who are not condoning this, who are not celebrating this, because it would serve, you know, us more to show we can be logical, we can still have humanity, we can still, you know, express, you know, our condolences for someone that we disagreed with, for someone that maybe triggered us and whatnot. You know, that is what I do believe would be one of the most powerful things. It would show more stability, it would give more credibility, you know. But oftentimes, when there is an assassination, it turns that person into a martyr, and then it puts a fire under the people who shared that ideology. Everybody who, you know, has pretty much ever been assassinated, you know, their ideology was not eradicated with them. It gets strengthened. You know, people become more extreme then. They say, see, this is exactly why we're fighting. This is exactly why that other side is so crazy and so unstable, because they're celebrating this. There's so many people who are going to be pulling up TikToks of people on the left celebrating and cheering and stuff like that, and using that to justify certain things. And so many people, I think that they're not completely understanding that. You know, political violence, I think, does need to be checked because it sets a precedence that if one person can be taken out for their speech, no person is safe, including you, including me, anybody in a controversial space. The entire exotical sector is controversial. You know, even before the sector was really a thing, you know, it was a controversial thing to enjoy your skin tone, to identify yourself, and to say, no, you don't get to throw me in and out of blackness. No, you don't get to tell me that I'm brown skin, I'm, you know, medium brown, I'm this. No, I am light skin. I perceive myself as light skin. I'm light skin forever. I'm light skin when I have a tan. I'm light skin when I don't have a tan. I'm light skin in the winter. I'm light skin in different lighting. I'm light skin whether or not you call me light skin. You know, things like that. People can feel as though is anti-black. They can feel like it's hateful. And you know, it sets a very dangerous precedence to, or precedent to, leave political violence unchecked, to say, well, if you say these things, then it's justified, you should be unalived. That it sets a dangerous precedent. It really does, because there are so many people who, you know, whether he really was hateful, whether he really was misogynistic, sexist, a Christian nationalist, an extremist, any of those things, you know, there are people who critique this space who we may say very logical things, things that just make sense to us, that don't sound super extreme, and somebody else can hear them and they're triggered. They feel like we are, you know, extreme. They feel like we're anti-black. They feel like, you know, we're self-hating, all these different things. They feel like we have superiority complexes. To this day, you know, I watched a recent Kia Roan video. She still has this delusion in her head that she became basically not welcome in the space because she disagreed with us. She still, in her head, seems to not understand how her saying just because you're light skinned, just because you're biracial doesn't mean that you're pretty, is a humbling tactic. And that was the issue. She seems to still not understand that. People have their way of, you know, logically understanding things. You never know when somebody could think that you're the anti-black one, you're the hateful one, and then, oh, you're hateful. Now it's, you know, okay, it's justified. You know, it, like I said, it backfires. Assassinations backfire time and time and time again. When people attempted to assassinate Trump, it made him a boss to a lot of people. It made him like, oh yeah, like it made him cooler to a lot of people. A lot of people don't understand that, and then the people who are celebrating it and stuff, it makes them look more unstable. It makes them lose their credibility. And because I'm a person who is very moderate, I would say, in my views, I try to critique on the left and on the right that, you know it, yes, people's words have power. They do make people feel things, but your feelings are not facts. Your feelings are not a justification to go out and take a life. And it's, if people don't understand how this precedent being set that it's okay could backfire on them, you know that that's just not good. It is very harmful. His assassination is not going to eliminate his ideology. It's going to energize his followers, which I would say that he is somebody who I do think had pretty extreme views on certain things. All that, if people then decide to, God forbid, assassinate Candace Owens or Amala Ekpunobi or Amir Odom or trying to think about somebody else, maybe Brett Cooper or Ben Shapiro. I'm just trying to think of like names that I could think of. um Tucker Carlson, these names that I just think of, that I hear end up in the media. It doesn't mean that, oh, we're going to extinguish everybody who believes that, and everybody who believes that is just going to be quieter now. They're going to be afraid. They're going to like stop believing that. They're going to change their mind, change their heart. It's not what happens. It says, see, this is exactly why we're fighting. In honor of them, we're going to fight harder. We're going to fight harder. That's exactly what happens if you look at like the Black community when it comes to, deceased civil rights leaders. There's so many people who, they're going so hard, in remembrance of MLK, in remembrance of uh, Malcolm X, or in remembrance of Marcus Garvey. There are so many people who they basically feel they kind of absorb the energy of that person, and they say, okay, I have to be the next person. You even saw it with like Kevin Samuels. There are like, tons of baby Kevin Samuels now who now are even more extreme, who, they feel more empowered and more enraged, infuriated, and more justified in their beliefs. I also feel like, in general, something that I didn't necessarily recognize when I was younger, and I spoke earlier about being super triggered by Steven Crowder and his Change My Mind series. I now, as a much more mature woman, appreciate debate and appreciate the willingness to discuss. I do not like the whole, let's just fight. Let's just, unalive. Let's just assassinate. Let's just, I'm not a fan of that. I think that it's very dangerous. And I think that it really can harm us all. I will say, just living in this country together, because what happens is it ends up making the state look weak. It makes the government look weak. And so then they're over there feeling like, okay, well, it's very dangerous. It can be a very dangerous thing if people feel as though the state doesn't have power. They feel like the state is weak. Then it's like, okay, well, how do we show that we're powerful? How do we kind of flex our power and our authority so people can know to stay in line? Things like this can spread like wildfire. So how do we put this out? How do we make people realize that there will be consequences if they do this? That can be a very, tough thing. And then, further than that, the people who are basically backing and supporting the assassin and the assassination, it ends up making them look illegitimate. It makes them look tyrannical. Whether or not that's their intent, that's what it looks like. And so it's more dangerous, in my opinion, to try to unalive somebody like Charlie Kirk who you disagree with than to just out argue him. I really think that it's safer for everyone if we all just say, okay, we can disagree, we can agree to disagree. Maybe you can't change my mind. Maybe I still, you know, assign certain labels to you. I think you're this ist, think blank ist, whatever. But I am just going to focus on you have your right to speak your piece. I have my right to speak my piece. We don't have to change each other's minds, but violence is not something we're condemning, or violence is not something that we are supporting. We condemn violence. We support debate. We support the ability to discuss and have people live to discuss another day, because his unaliving immortalizes him as a symbol of persecution. you know um I just feel as though this is not about him himself, but it is about deeper principles about freedom of speech, the danger of silencing people that you disagree with through violence, and how easily this logic could be turned against any of the exoticals, anybody who has a belief about anything. Can you imagine if instead of us saying, hey, change my mind, hey, let's debate, hey, let's discuss, it becomes pew 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 pew. And I'm not even an anti pew pew person. I love the pew pews. Personally, I do. You don't know what this could be justified, or like what this logic could carry over to. And I don't praise this man. I was never a supporter. I was never somebody who, you know, really ever followed him. I never liked him just because of certain things that I heard him say. They would just kind of rub me the wrong way. And especially when it comes to, I'm somebody who tries to be more moderate. I try to be more balanced. So whenever people are getting super duper extreme on either side, I don't like it. I don't like how extreme things can get, how, you know, just kind of illogical and fanatical people can get on both sides. I would say that I try to be balanced in critiquing both sides of the road. At the same time, I do strongly condemn assassination. I do not support that ever, even when it comes to, people who I feel like are disagreeing with the exotical space or saying things that I think are harmful to us. I will still never celebrate. I will never, ever support this as being the answer. I think that it expresses, or I think that it sets a dangerous precedent for creators and thinkers in every single sphere. This does impact you, it impacts us all. And I don't like this being something that people are not comfortable condemning. I very much respect people who can say, I disagree with him, I dislike him, rest in peace, my condolences to your family, I condemn this. This should not have happened. You know, I just feel like this, I will reiterate, it's not about left, it's not about right, it's not about conservative, it's not about liberal, it's not about any of those things. It's about the right to exist, to speak, to debate without fearing for your life. If this can happen to him for his views, what's to stop something from happening to an exotical creator because someone calls our discussions hateful? You know, um I don't want to dismiss the people who have felt, very alienated, very demoralized, very um triggered by his words, because words do have weight, they do have meaning. And I definitely empathize with that. That's why I tried to share how triggered I was when I was younger and I would watch Steven Crowder's Change My Mind series. I understand what it feels like to hear somebody expressing certain views and hearing the applause and hearing how many people agree with them, and genuinely fear for the state of your country, to fear for your safety. I understand that these words, come from beliefs which can be used to justify actions, and whether that's violence against women or, you know, so like so many things. I understand what it feels like in your body to be triggered, and I don't think of being triggered as like a moral failing, like, oh, you're weak because you're triggered. I get triggered to this day. I watch people's videos and my heart starts pounding to this day, whether it's somebody disagreeing with me or it's somebody calling me out, maybe not by name, but they're calling out a behavior, they're calling out a mindset, they're calling out something that I'm working on and I haven't completely gotten all the way there yet. That's a human thing, to be triggered. I know what it feels like to start feeling your temperature get hot, or, to, have your heart pounding, and to start maybe overthinking or playing out all of these different scenarios of what could happen if this belief that somebody is expressing can become more widespread. I empathize with people who genuinely felt afraid when Trump won. I empathize with that because it's like mental health is a real thing. um, and we all understand that words and beliefs and behaviors, we understand that whilst, everybody has their different justifications. Some people who voted for Trump, it was simply because they were racist. It was simply because they maybe were misogynistic. Like, I 100% believe that, and feeling defeated, feeling like things are, kind of backtracking, like we're not making as much progress. I completely understand feeling like that, you know. Um, I do feel like trying to silence your opposition through violence is a very dangerous thing. It's a slippery slope. It sets a dangerous precedent, and it destabilizes our country. It destabilizes our society. It is not something to celebrate. I empathize if that is your gut reaction. I empathize if it feels like a win. But you have to really think about what happens. What are we being distracted from? What laws are being passed as we're all discussing this and paying attention to this? What can be getting, what's the past tense of sneak? Snuck. What can be getting snuck behind? I don't know. That's probably still not it. That's probably not right. But what is being, like, slipped under the rug? It I feel like debate is something that should be legitimate. Something that I really love about this space and that I admire is our many creators' central focus on, let's not talk about whether or not you think that I'm a bleacher. Let's not talk about whether or not you think I, got a surgery, or whether or not you think I look like the women in my images on my channel. Let's talk about the talking points. Let's talk with facts and logic and all of those things. Not because I feel like emotion is uh, less important or less valid than logic. That's not what I think. But I think when it comes to disagreeing in debate, I respect, I actually really like when I see people who are on two different sides of an issue, who both feel strongly, but they can be respectful. They're both using logic. And that's what I respect, especially in this space. There are a lot of creators that I don't necessarily agree with certain things that they say, but the way that they express it, the way that they're backing it up, I have a deep respect for them. I'm like, well, they didn't just pull this out of their ass. They didn't just pull this out of thin air. They're not just saying this because they feel like it's a popular thing to say or whatever. They genuinely believe this, and I respect that. I feel like, you know, I I think that that is always a favorable outcome for a debate, is to get to the point where you both have a deeper respect for one another. Say, I can see that the beliefs that you have, they're coming from a genuine place. It's coming from a deeper and a greater sense of purpose. You feel as though this belief and having this belief, you feel like you're doing something for the greater good of society. You feel like you're doing something for the future, whatever. And two people can have that same intention and have vastly different beliefs. And I feel as though that is, you know, that is always a good sign in society where we can, at the end of a debate, shake hands and say, well, you did not change my mind, but I walked away from this with a deep understanding of your position and a respect for why you believe that. And I understand you more and I'm able to empathize with you. I feel like that is always, the best way to leave a debate or disagreement. This whole it's okay to silence people who disagree with me through violence, that's dangerous. It could be turned, you know, against anybody at any point. And I just want to kind of, in conclusion, to try to wrap this up and put a bow on it, as people will say, I have never been a fan of Charlie Kirk. Never have I ever been a fan. But assassination is not a victory. It is not. I think it's cowardly. I condemn assassination because I think that it takes a lot of strength, a lot of like mental fortitude to be able to say, I'm triggered by what you're saying. I disagree with what you're saying, but I still am balanced enough mentally to believe that you deserve to go home to your wife and children, even though I disagree with you, even though I don't like what you're saying, even though I feel like you're an asshole, even though I feel like you are racist or this, that, and the third. Like me personally, I don't feel like because you're racist that you deserve to be assassinated. Not even saying that he is or he's not or whatever. Like I said, I've never been a fan, don't pay attention to him that much. But something like this, it's not a win. It's cowardly. It's not real justice. Killing somebody for their ideas, or I don't know if I could say that on YouTube, unaliving somebody for their ideas, for their words, it doesn't end the ideology. That's not what happens. It makes sure that everybody who supports him feels more emboldened. It inflames them, it fans the flames. We've seen that time and time again. And if this is something that we can say is acceptable, what's to stop it from happening to any of us who speak outside of the approved narrative? Today it's Charlie Kirk. Tomorrow, God forbid, it could be an exotical creator. Disagreement is not inherently hate. I am not as well informed about what he's saying. He definitely I'm trying to find. I'm going to probably keep trying to do research to find these things that he's saying, because I deeply respect other exoticals that I will meet who, maybe tell me about something that I wasn't aware was taking place or whatever the case is. But I, in general, I just feel like we have to think it's bigger than our feelings. It's bigger than us feeling as though, oh, we have a quick win. Even if I was the most liberal person in the world, I'd like to hope that I could fall within the group of people who are expressing condolences and saying, I disagree with you. I think your face is weird looking and stupid. Like I said, I don't like to talk about the deceased, but I totally understand. Some people just, they look weird. You hate the things they say. They kind of just give you off vibes. I get that. But this is not the answer. It's never going to be the answer. Some people, and I've noticed this, some people think that their beliefs are just so logical or just so like second nature to everyone. I've had people come up to me trying to express their beliefs and stuff as if they're just talking about the weather. And I'm like, what you're saying is actually polarizing right now. What you're saying is actually kind of extreme. Everybody does not agree with you on this. Even with the things that I say, everybody does not agree with me. And I feel like a lot of people, you know, they they have a hard time understanding that your beliefs may not be that popular. They may not be that logical to everyone. They may not be second nature to everyone. They can come off as hateful or ignorant or bigoted to anyone. You have no idea who could hear what you're saying and take it and run with it. And this is not defending him. any of his beliefs, any of his views. This is specifically me wanting to talk about the fact that unaliving due to words is never something that we can condemn. It is a slippery slope, and this precedent being set is very dangerous. I would be very curious to see what happens politically following this. If this is something where it kind of becomes something where now, people on the more extreme right side are then trying to unalive, God forbid, more liberal people. And like, it's not something that is something that we should condemn or that we should justify. We should not justify this. We should condemn this, in my opinion. And you are free to disagree. I respect people for their beliefs. I empathize with understanding that words have weight and that you feel as though, this person who's expressed certain views could have emboldened certain people to take certain actions. I completely understand that. I can't defend him personally. I just can't. I can't, just because I've heard certain things that he says, so I can't defend him. I referenced also a lot of other people. I can't defend these people personally, but I would say unaliving in general, whether I agree with the person or disagree with them, whether I like them or not, that's very dangerous. It is not good for society. It strengthens their ideology, and it threatens all of our own survival as voices in a controversial space. So I feel like that is all I have to say on this for now. Um, I am sending love to everyone who doesn't know how to feel about this, everyone who has felt deeply hurt by words that he has said or views that he has expressed, people who have maybe even been personally hurt by people who then cited his beliefs, his takes as their backing and their justification. I understand that these things can really be life or death, and that these words, these ideologies and whatnot, that they do translate over to behavior. And I understand what it feels like to, see somebody win a presidency or see somebody have a voice or a platform that's very big or very popular, and feel afraid for what that means about your position in society, and wonder who will take their words and do this or that with them. I empathize with that. I totally understand that. And I think that we're all just learning and growing. And I really hope that, the country is able to get to a point where we're able to talk and able to discuss and able to hear each other out, because I think it is a dangerous thing. It's very dangerous for us to say, you disagree with me, I think you're hateful, you being unalived is justified now. That is very tough, especially because I'm a creator in a controversial space. All of us, anybody who identifies as an exotical, if you're an exotical creator, if you're somebody who, are just a unique person or critical thinker or whatever, if you're not just a stereotypical person who's a part of the general, monolith of how you are supposed to act or perform or whatever, this should be alarming to you, and it should be something that we're condemning. And I think that it's possible for us to hold two truths at the same time. It's possible to say, I think this person was XYZ, blah, 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 and his unaliving was not justified, and condemn it. I think that you can hold both. I think condemning somebody's um assassination is not equivalent in any way, shape, or form to defending their ideology and their beliefs. And so I really hope that I was able to, shed some light on what I feel like this means for us as a society. And I hope that I was able to, I hope to be able to share things that are of value. And, I don't want to make videos like this. I don't want to make videos that are more heavy and, going down this route as much, but I definitely do want to use my platform to speak on this. Strike while the iron is hot. I even watched a video. What's really strange is that I don't know why. As soon as I found out from another Exotical about this, the first person that I looked up was Amala Ekpanobi. I don't really watch her. I'm not subscribed to her. I disagree with many of her takes, but I don't know why I just felt as though I assumed she would have spoken on it. And I actually watched a video that was like, it was kind of hard to watch a little bit, where it's like you see her getting the news, and it's tough because she's somebody who is like, she's a beautiful young woman, and she's out there, she's being a free thinker, whether or not I agree with her. And then it almost becomes this: people disagree with me. People think that I'm hateful. People think that I'm controversial. Is this going to set a precedent that it's now justified to unalive me next? And so I really hope that we all stay safe. Um, I hope that we all are able to kind of just reflect on this and think about it. Think about, is it possible for us to disagree with somebody, but also feel like they deserve the right to go home at night? Me, I'm definitely the type of person where I feel like, I just want to I want to think about things deeper and think about, what does this mean? Who wins? Who loses from this type of situation? So what do you think, worldies? Let me know down in the comments below. Until next time, eyes on the prize.